The common image of the Japanese American during World War II is the internment camp. After watching this short film, I hope you leave with a different image of Japanese Americans during the war in your mind. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in December of 1941, the U.S. government panicked and, fearing sabotage by Japanese Americans should Japan invade the United States West Coast, ordered the relocation of over 100,000 Japanese Americans into the American interior. 2/3 of these Japanese Americans were legal U.S. citizens. The War Relocation Authority attempted to explain this procedure using civilized terminology, referencing potentially dangerous Japanese Americans living amongst the mostly loyal citizens as the main reason for the internment. Having said that, however, the reality for these Japanese Americans was a far more restrictive process. Here, George Takei describes one of the camps his family lived in for over a year.
Barbed wire. 3 levels of barbed wire fence and tanks patrolling.
The internment camps deprived Japanese Americans of their rights as a U.S. citizen. At first, they were banned from enlisting in the armed forces. Eventually, that ban was lifted somewhat to allow the Naisi, a Japanese word for second generation that refers to those Japanese Americans that had been born in America to parents that had immigrated here from Japan, to enlist in the Army. In Hawaii, on the day of the attack on Pearl Harbor, ROTC Japanese American students were called into duty to create the Hawaiian Territorial Guard. About a month later, when Washington realized that Japanese Americans were serving in the HTG, they were immediately dismissed. The students wrote a letter arguing for their right to serve their country in some manner, be it active military duty or otherwise. In February of 1942, the almost 200 students were allowed to form a labor battalion, responsible for, among other tasks, building roads, guarding military bases, and stringing barbed wire. This group was known as the Varsity Victory Volunteers. In January 1943, after 11 months of dedicated service, the volunteers were allowed to help form the 442nd Infantry Regiment, which was primarily composed of Naisi Japanese American men. In one infamous example of the regiment's bravery, the men were ordered to move deep into German territory in order to rescue the Lost Battalion, the 141st Regiment, made up of Texans that had been cut off by German soldiers and were forced to dig in behind enemy lines for almost a week without food or water. In the process of rescuing the 200-some that consisted of the 141st, the 442nd lost over 800 men. This example is one among several instances of valor for Japanese American soldiers in World War II. The 100th Infantry Battalion was another Naisi force that would go on to combine with the 442nd after they rescued the Lost Battalion, due to a depleted number of troops. In addition, the 522nd Field Artillery Battalion was created during the final year of the war, and was comprised of former 442nd soldiers who would move to whichever command needed extra troops. The 442nd Regiment, whose motto was famously "Go for Broke," would go on to become the most decorated regiment in United States Armed Forces history, and included 21 Medal of Honor recipients. Recently, the entire regiment was awarded with the highest civilian award in the United States, the Congressional Gold Medal. While the public may more easily remember the internment camps, those Japanese American soldiers who fought for what few rights they did still have are far more deserving of the public's recognition. That recognition may be coming in the form of medals handed out 60 years late, or with you taking away the imagery of this short documentary. But either way, it is deserved and long overdue.